Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Dee Dee. We are the hilarious outcome of opposing brains sharing a mutual desire to share knowledge and positive thinking about hemp and cannabis.
We are here to tear down the walls built by Big Pharma and other big companies that seek to keep the human race in fear and divided.
We are here to shatter the myths about hemp and cannabis and change the stigma of this amazing plant. Welcome to Hemp and Happiness with the Hemp Queen
And Emperor.
podcast. Join us as we venture into this misunderstood and the unknown. Thanks, Matt, for that introduction.
I'm just trying to get pumped.
Hey guys, it is Dee Dee and Matt here for Hemp and Happiness. Thank you for joining us again. I don't even know what episode we're up to, but it's awesome.
Dude, this is like 40.
That's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you for all our listeners and for all your feedback and support. We appreciate it very much.
If we make it through the winter, we'll go full we'll have gone through the seasons.
That's true.
So,
yeah, because we started in spring, didn't we? Last year. Yeah.
Yep, we did. Very beginning of spring. So now
We got 12 episodes.
We're at the
12 episodes and it's spring again.
God.
Oh, I can't wait till spring.
So
I hate this weather.
yes, all right. So as I think most of you listeners know, we live in Louisville, Kentucky. Both Dee Dee and I, and it is a great place to live 3 seasons out of the year.
Yeah, just 3.
And then winter rolls around in what's referred to as the Ohio Valley, which is this region. And you get a lovely mixture of shit and piss. Yes. And you can get shit, you can get piss, or you can get a lovely mixture of shit and piss. Yeah. And that's what you deal with throughout the winter. Mm-hmm. And it's also when all the holidays are going on and you're supposed to be happy and fucking bright and smiling and making sure, you know, everything's so wonderful and you're just not feeling it. So if you're like me and you know that it sucks, you have no choice but to either move, which I don't recommend, because I've tried to live in warm places and they're as fucking crazy as it is here. Just you're just in a different situation of crazy.
Yes, agreed.
You just got to dig deep and not let it get the best of you, because this time of year will get the best of you.
It will. And that's when I always recommend to make sure you're taking your CBD products along with any other, Delta 8, Delta 9 products as well. That CBD is going to help you a lot during this time.
Well, and also, unless you're sick and it's ill-advised, I highly recommend you spend as much time outdoors as possible.
Agreed.
Because this is the time of year where everyone shuts themselves in to try to, stay warm and get cozy, and that's totally fine, totally cool. But your body's made to be outdoors. And if you can get yourself out in fresh air and get yourself out for exercise, it's going to help you maintain a good, healthy mental attitude and as well as help you physically. So if you can get out 10 to 15 minutes a day, I would highly recommend
Especially if the sun's out. We all need that vitamin D.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, just food for thought. Hang in there. Mm-hmm. Don't let that shitty season get the best of you.
Yeah, for sure.
Kick right back.
Right.
When you're getting your ass kicked, all you can do is kick back.
And just think about it. 12 more episodes. We'll be in spring.
12 episodes away.
12 episodes away.
From sunshine and
maybe 12 or 6. How many weeks are in the year?
52.
Yeah, so 12. Woohoo.
Yeah.
I was right.
Well done.
No, thank you.
All right, so let's dive in. Today, we're going to have a really fun and interesting episode.
I don't know what this one is even about.
Yeah, sometimes I like to surprise Dee Dee with a surprise topic.
It is what it is.
This one's pretty good, actually. It is. It's the podcast is actually entitled "I Learned It from Watching You," and it's going to be fun, but it is kind of important. It's all about talking.
I learned it from watching you.
Oh,
Dad.
no! Wait, don't get into it yet.
Okay.
We recognize the importance and the growing importance of communicating with your children, communicating with your family. Now that cannabis, hemp, CBD are all becoming mainstream, there's much less of a stigma attached to it. It's as important or more important now to discuss it, cannabis usage and hemp and CBD usage with your children as it's ever been. And that's going to be different conversations at different ages and different households and different, views,
right,
even within the cannabis community. So we just, I want to get into that a little bit, discuss that. But before we do, I do want to play, and hopefully our producer can cue this, because we are we don't receive payment for this podcast. So that makes us, that covers us under the Free Usage Act. That we can share. We can share little tidbits of uncopyrighted things.
Good to know.
So for any Gen Xers out there, listen to this and tell me what it reminds you of.
It's yours?
No,
My mother said she found it in your closet.
I don't know. One of the guys must
Must have what?
Look, Dad, it's
Where
not.
did you get it?
Dad,
Answer me. Who taught you how to do this stuff?
You, all right? I learned it by watching you.
Parents who use drugs have children who use drugs.
Yeah,
So
buddy.
if that doesn't bring you back to the after
I
school
knew as soon as you said it,
special
what freaking commercial
days,
it was.
I don't know what will.
Oh, I learned it by watching you, Dad.
I love the hostility. That was late 80s. War on drugs was at its zenith.
Yeah.
And
I didn't even know what all those were until we had DARE at school.
It was all about how they adopted the Christian ethos of how scared can we make you? Can we fear you into submission? And that's not a knock on any Christians, by the way. I'm thoroughly down with the Christian faith. It's some of the church concepts that I have issues with.
I understand.
That's another podcast.
That is another podcast.
Making you afraid, making you in fear, which was a horrible mistake, in my opinion.
Especially when it comes to the cannabis. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but just a kind of fun thing. So now we're in a whole new era. Arguably, the war on drugs is over. People, the eye of Sauron is now turned to big pharma, which I love.
Right.
In fact, it's funny. I actually,
drug.
I went to get some cough medicine last week because I do live in the shit and pissville of the world at this moment, and I've had a really bad lung infection, but I won't get into that. So they gave me that what's that? The cough medicine with the
codeine.
Codeine,
Yeah.
yes. And let me tell you something. They were not playing with that codeine. They were like, it was a teeny ass little bottle. And it was like, you get like a teaspoon a day, and there is no refills. And we need to see 3 forms of ID, and you need to sign here.
And blood.
And I thought, you know what? Good for them. And it actually, and I'm gonna be straight up, it worked wonderfully.
Well, when I had my surgery, when I had my appendix taken out, they sent me home. I won't do Percocets. Like, I do not like the way I feel after them, and I see weird shit. I don't like that. So they sent me home with some hydrocodone. I mean, it helped. I only did it the one day, the very first day out of surgery. After that, I was like, I'm good. I'm getting back on my Delta 8 and my Delta 9 and my CBD products. And I had a pretty damn quick recovery. I was back to work a couple days later. I mean, I couldn't button my pants, and I had stretchy pants on, but other than that, that was the most painful thing about the whole surgery. It's just where they punctured you. Yeah. So I think some of those, that's why Big Pharma fights us, man.
Yeah.
That's why Big Pharma fights it.
Well, but at the same time, I have to admit that I did use opioid, and it did work. So I can't deny the results. I mean, it was effective. But it was very refreshing to me to see that they weren't just handing it out and saying, don't come in when you need a refill, just call and we'll give you one. And
and all of that had to change.
Here's a mega bottle.
Because people were taking such advantage of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then selling the Kool-Aid. And you've got kids mixing the hydrocodone and
With
the cough medicine.
making lean.
Yep.
Sprite and whatever.
Yeah, making it their own cough syrup.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're stupid. Kids are dumb.
Well,
I remember doing some stupid shit too when I was a kid. But,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Now there's a lot more potent stuff. I mean, a kid gets a hold of some fentanyl and God, that's horrible.
Yeah.
So, you know, kids out there today have got way more crazy shit that they can get from the street than we technically could as a kid.
It's more accessible with the internet and with, you know, virtual communication.
Yep.
Like, you know, getting a hold of your dealer when I was a kid was damn near fucking impossible. And when you did get a hold of the jackass, he was so out of his mind. Half the time he wouldn't show up. If he did, he was 3 hours late.
I think ours was like like an older brother. I had an older brother that always had stuff. So,
oh my God.
And when I say stuff, I'm only talking about marijuana.
I think
I never would try anything else. It was not a gateway drug for me.
There are countless rock songs about waiting on these, you know, now dealers are professional. They show up in a suitcase with a suit and tie.
Right.
And a big pharma.
Yep.
You know,
persona.
I don't technically work for Big Pharma. I just represent them on my side hustle.
Right.
But anyway.
Oh my God.
So there's two. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we'll have a suit pending from this one. I can tell. Okay, so there's really two main.
This is our opinion only.
Yeah,
we are not.
This is our opinion, Big Pharma.
Yeah.
If you notice us as a little flea on your carcass, don't scratch.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a gentle bite.
Yeah.
Anyway, two kind of things I want to cover in this podcast. One. Talking to your kids about cannabis, marijuana, and hemp CBD, and talking to your kids about your use of hemp, cannabis, and CBD, because they're really two different things. Mm-hmm. One, just to start out, just talking to your kids about hemp, cannabis, and CBD, regardless of your usage, I think is important for everyone, because you do not want to leave it up, for God's sakes, don't leave it up to the education system to tell your kids about this stuff, because they will be fed misinformation.
Yeah.
I don't even want to get into it. It's really your responsibility to educate your children, particularly on appropriate use of recreational, you know, drugs and supplements, which is technically what I think.
Well, I definitely think that hemp and CBD is
treads it.
It's more
there's
of a
line.
dietary supplement.
Yeah,
and I mean you can't call it that, but I definitely think your body uses it like it would a dietary supplement, like a vitamin. Mm-hmm.
So I actually found a website, cannabisreport.org, which was pretty good, and I'd not run across that site before.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it'll be in the show notes. But they did a really good 10 factors for talking to your kids about marijuana. I'm not going to recite it because there's stuff I definitely don't agree with in the article, but I'm going to hit the top 10 points and just talk on those. So number one is give your kids a bit of history about marijuana, which I think is very interesting because...
Don't make it boring.
Well, you don't, but it's like whenever you have like the story and the idea in your head, but then when you break it down to its history, like I find these things fascinating.
Yeah, I do too.
The history of curse words, the history of swearing, fascinating. If you ever just want to go off on a tangent and learn how insignificant cursing is versus the stigma that we put on shit, fuck, piss.
No, you don't have to say them all.
I mean, I'd love to run through the whole gamut. I don't have it in front of my head. In front of me. Otherwise, I would be happy to recite it.
Reminder: we need to put explicit language in the notes.
Yeah. So, and the history of. I've been really into the history of religions lately, and like where they actually spawn from. Absolutely fascinating, and so many people don't know about it because they get so into studying the religion itself and the dogma and the communal principles and all and the philosophy. The history is so often overlooked, and then when you look at the history, you're like, "Oh man, that's crazy." So I think that marijuana is much the same way. You know, it has this whole marijuana.
Right.
But then when you break it down and look at its uses, religious uses, communal uses, health uses, medicinal uses, recreational uses, and how that has come through history, as well as hemp and the pliability and usability of the plant and the 1,000,001 different things it can be used for. It's really fascinating, and it really helps pull the veil off of what you're really looking at and what you're really dealing with. So I totally agree with that, and I think you can totally make that an interesting conversation. Number 2 is discuss the legality. You might be in a state where it's illegal, like Kentucky.
Yep.
And your kids need to be aware of the laws because, man,
They can
you don't
still
wanna,
get in trouble.
yeah, you don't want to get in trouble at an early age. It's just not fun.
No.
And then it gets less and less fun. If there's ever a time to turn yourself around, your youth is definitely the time. But
Right.
you want your kids to know that if they break the law, it's not a small deal.
Right.
It can be a big deal, and it can be a big pain in the ass, especially if you want to do things like get into the Air Force or go to a certain university that might do a background check, things like that. Yeah, you want your kids to know the legalities and the ramifications in your state and in your area. Number 4 would be talk to your kids about CBD, and that the difference between CBD and marijuana and THC.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of people, even today, even though CBD and hemp has been legal since arguably 2014, fully legal since 2018, no question, there's still a huge amount of confusion that CBD will get you high, and CBD is the same as marijuana. And we have older people come into our shop thinking,
well, did I tell you
wearing
the story?
sunglasses with cash, saying they want some CBD.
Yeah. Did I tell you the story about my niece? She's in her 30s, but she has a son, and she gives our full spectrum gummies to him because he has ADD and ADHD. Well, he literally was in school and said his teacher made something about him being rambunctious or whatever. And he's like, oh, I need to take more of my CBD gummy. Or I need to take more of my weed gummy. He called it a weed gummy. And the teacher texted my niece and said, hey, you might want to talk to your son. I'm sure it's a CBD gummy, and later someone actually called Child Protective Services on her. And the CPS worker came out and she's like, look, I lost a sister to heroin. I am not going to give my son pharmaceutical drugs to help him with this. These work. They're legal. My aunt, makes them. I get them from her. I know the source. And the CPS was like, I agree with you 100%. Keep giving those to your son. There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
And I was really worried for her, though. I was a little scared about that. So it is legality. And that's Ohio. They have medical marijuana available.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but for her, and I'm telling you, my great nephew, he's something else. So for him to call it weed gummies, of course, I just chuckled because, he's just being a smart ass kid. He knows the difference. But,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Good kid.
Absolutely.
Smart too.
Absolutely.
Oh, so smart.
Another, next on the list, number 5 falling in those lines would be avoid using the word drug when referring to marijuana.
Correct.
Yes. Because a lot of people, it's still, to me, marijuana being THC, most specifically Delta 9 THC, is undefined in that it's technically not a drug. It does not fall into the FDA's just definition of a drug.
And yet it's a Schedule 1.
They don't. Yeah. Okay, you can swirl that one around in your head and then knock yourself on the head with a tack hammer.
Thanks, Nixon.
Then you have you're not allowed to classify it as a supplement because it's not an approved supplement.
Correct.
So marijuana. is a
Fucking
gray
plant.
area.
It's plant.
Well, there's a lot, but yeah, there's a lot of plants that'll fuck you up.
I know that's true.
Yeah. Deadly nightshade is a plant.
That's true.
Morning glories are a plant. Don't go putting it in your tea.
I mean, poppy seeds.
I'll eat the shit out of some poppy seeds.
Poppy seeds, yeah. But the shit that comes, yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I don't know that the plant argument's going to stand out.
Probably not.
But I mean, kratom is a plant.
True.
Okay. Next on the list, discuss THC gummies will get you high. And this is interesting to me because I like the fact that the community is moving more towards edibles and less towards smoking because it's a much healthier alternative for your body. It's also a better way to absorb THC, in my opinion, and it's going to create health benefits instead of pull away from your health. There is a recycle factor, which needs to be considered now because these jars that the edibles are being shipped in is, creating extra carbon. And it's something that definitely needs to be discussed. But to circle back, there's a lot more THC gummies in the household today.
Yeah. You got to keep those away from your animals, too, the pets.
And it's really important that kids not get a hold of those, even though there's been no documented cases, and no one has brought one to me yet, of an overdose resulting in death from THC. Someone who ingests too much of it, particularly a child, is going to have a really bad time.
Apparently, there was one out in West Virginia.
But that was not. That's not
wasn't.
proven.
No,
that's not proven. That was just a. That was just a martyred. Like let's try to make a martyr case here. There was another one that I read a month ago stating the same claims, and when you got down to the nitty gritty of it, the person was in a terrible health. Had terrible health conditions and opted to kill themselves. And they chose to blame that on marijuana,
of course,
or an overdose of THC. Yeah, so I'm calling bullshit until someone can show me empirical evidence that shows it was an overdose resulting from marijuana.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, does not exist.
I agree.
And there's no scientific proof that I've been presented with to show me that it exists.
No,
so
I agree.
I'm more than happy to change my opinion. I work off of empirical evidence, not the fucking tabloids
Hearsay.
or mass media
Right.
or some article published by a subsidiary of Big Pharma. Just not going to do it.
Amen.
I'm just not going to do it. Okay, so moving on. Explain to your children what prescription marijuana is and that it's okay for prescribed marijuana for children, which is kind of an interesting topic because obviously for a child to be prescribed marijuana, for a child to take marijuana, they have to be quite ill.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something.
Typically seizures.
Yeah.
That's the big one.
Pretty major illness because
Cancer.
I personally believe that there is evidence that shows that chronic THC use in an undeveloped brain can have effects that could or could not. It's not determined yet whether they could be long-term, whether they're reversible, but there's really no question that if you give your body a synthetic hormone, it's going to result in your body essentially having to relearn how to produce that hormone. I think that if you introduce a synthetic cannabinoid that reacts directly with your body, and your body hasn't developed the ability to make that cannabinoid, there could be some long-term
go back
effect
a little
there.
bit with that because we've touched on it in other podcasts, but we create our own cannabinoids in our brain.
Yes, those are called endocannabinoids.
Yes, and we're not talking about THC or marijuana being synthetic, but
no.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure you clarified that.
THC, naturally occurring THC, is a synthetic of a naturally occurring endocannabinoid. And what that means is that when it gets in your body thinks it's an endocannabinoid when it's not. It's actually just a external cannabinoid that you've introduced to your body. your body doesn't know the difference, and it absorbs it as such,
Correct.
and responds to it as such. Steroids are a perfect example. You get people that decide they're going to, get on a nice test cycle. They really get into it. They're loving the test. I personally know several of these people. They get older, they get out of the game, bodybuilding, athletics, whatever they're doing, want to have kids, want to settle down, and they're having all kind of problems getting their body to produce enough tests naturally to, produce sperm, to be healthy. And then they end up having to supplement test pharmaceutically just to, continue on the natural path. So
some things can be a vicious cycle.
Yeah. So the point is, you want to have that conversation with your kids. In all likelihood, they will be exposed at some point with the way things are going to children who are prescribed medical marijuana. And, it's important to have that conversation. I also recommend you have the conversation of the difference between prescribed medication versus street medication.
Right.
Because self-medication is a huge problem in this country. But at the same time, prescription is a huge problem in this country. So, we've got a lot of work to do. And I think that it starts in the home, explaining to your kids at your comfort level what you determine is okay, not okay.
Right.
And making sure that they at least have that baseline to make their own judgments from.
Correct.
Yeah. The next one would be have a conversation with your kids about when marijuana might be offered to them, particularly edibles, because, smoking has this certain connotation, right? Like, my kid's in a different situation because he's totally educated on this stuff and he's knee deep in it. Like he can't get into my truck without listening to
one of our podcasts,
a podcast or
He's been to the shop
professorial, speech or something. I'm always downloading shit to listen to because I try to continue my education. But that being aside, I don't believe he would ever smoke. But had he not been exposed to, the industry via me, if he was offered a lovely looking gummy or edible, well, that's much more attractive and palatable to kids. And a kid might say, well, I would never smoke marijuana. Oh, but this is just a piece of candy.
Yeah.
Like, this is the most harmless looking thing in the world. But
I think there's more rules that are being set in place where you cannot have edibles that look appealing to children.
Yeah.
Like they don't want them to be bears or animal figures, just kind of a plain dumpy square. You know what I mean? Because so they've made that.
The marketing regulations have really they're in their infancy state.
Yes.
And there's only so much you can do with marketing. And again, people are going to try to make things as marketable as possible.
Correct.
Us included. I mean, we just spent a ton of time and money rebranding some of our stuff.
We did.
To make it, more attractive so that people will see it and go, ooh, what's that? And buy it. So we're not innocent of that, but you have to be aware of what, your children are exposed to every day. They're bombarded by marketing. So if they see something that looks, interesting to them, or that's, the new trend of marketing, they might be inclined to give it a try because they're sucked into that, that marketing vacuum that takes a hold of all of us, but especially kids.
Correct.
And then the last one is just, discuss the risks with your kids about
whoop your ass.
Yeah. Well, and that's what goes on in my house. Even though I never actually whoop my kid's ass, he understands the negative and positive reinforcement. And I try to straddle that fence pretty well, where good behavior is rewarded and bad behavior is not rewarded, we'll say, and there's something of a fear factor there, but it's not a physical intimidation. Certainly, it's I'm not going to get to do this. I might not see the sunlight. I might not talk to my friends. I might forget what a video game looks like. things like that, and holding to what you say you're going to do. But go ahead.
I remember the first time when Morgan came to talk to me about it, because, and, she's like, so what is that marijuana? And I'm like, it's definitely used more medicinally. And, obviously her dad has seizures, and she understood that. And we had a very long discussion. And the fact that, she's in her 20s now and she knows exactly what it's used for. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she even worked for me for a little while there. So she's very well knowledged in all of that. But I remember she was 16 and she didn't know what it was until she went out with her friends.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, how the hell you know?
Right.
And she's like, well, I'm like, okay, first off, you don't know where it's coming from. It could be laced with anything. Mm-hmm. If that's something you really want to try, let's talk about this. She's like, no, I don't. I haven't. I was just curious because, the smell and blah, blah, blah. But when you're a parent, like when you're a kid, man, you don't think of that shit. But then it's when you become a parent, you're like, oh, I got it.
Right.
Oh, man.
Well, but you also want to...
I know what I did as a damn teenager, but I don't want my daughter doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you too.
Yeah.
You don't want your son doing half the shit you did. But
no.
Kids also don't... Usually you have to make your own mistakes.
Yep.
And you have to learn a lot of things on your own. So if, God forbid, your kid does get involved, try to be understanding, I guess is the best way I can.
Well, and you have to educate yourself as well.
You do.
Because that's part of the problem, too, is if, the whole reason that the war on drugs failed was because once you got past the fear factor, there was really no explanation. It was just drugs are bad.
Right. Just say no. Just say no.
Why are drugs bad? Well, because they are.
And that's the thing, too. But it's okay for you to take a pill. If the doctor prescribes it, that's okay.
Well, and you have to give kids credit for that. They're smart enough for you to say, okay, well, this is why this is bad for you. Mm-hmm. And this is why this is not bad for you. And this is when it's appropriate to take this. And this is when it's not appropriate to take this. And actually having that knowledge versus saying, the whole, because I said so, mm-hmm. Because all that does is just make them curious. And then when they take drugs, and guess what? Oh, this feels great.
Yeah. I'm going to keep doing it.
They were full of shit. Right?
Right.
And it's right at the peak of that rebellion stage.
Yeah, buddy.
Where they're looking for an excuse to rebel anyway. So it's like, oh, this drug shit is for me.
Yeah.
And I'm also, I'm lumping marijuana into that category because, the smoking is a risk factor. Again, mm-hmm. the synthetic anandamide, brain struggling to produce its own anandamide, that leading to issues in future development. Well, it's all considerations that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, and kids now, it's mostly vaping.
Yeah.
And I found a vape battery in Morgan's stuff because I'd go through her shit. I ain't even upset to admit that. And I about lost my shit.
Yeah.
When I'm like, you do not understand how much this can hurt you. And back then, that shit was filled with propylene glycol and, God forbid, a vitamin E or whatever. There are kids that have been seriously hurt, and I do believe there are some deaths from the vitamin E in the vapes.
Yeah,
that shit possible. Will kill you. You can't smoke that. They were using it as a cutting method.
Right.
So I was terrified about that. But now she came to me and was like, Mom, I tried some weed. Well, let's talk about that.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Big difference. But I was more upset about the, and she never did that, by the way. I was older when she was older. She was a good kid. She got in trouble, don't get me wrong. But she's still a good kid. And she's definitely grown out of a lot of the child stuff, which I think all of us have. You know what I mean? And also, I think the big thing about marijuana, with the fact that more places it's becoming legal, most kids don't give a shit. If it's legal, they don't want to try it. It almost seems like it's the illegal, like, no, do not try that one. It's illegal. You can't. Those are the ones that are like, yeah, I got to try that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that there's that the stigma being lifted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, again, not to reflect
because you're being
constantly
bad.
to my own life, but it's just like when Jack was, I guess I'm not going to hurt anything to say his name. We brewed beer when he was like 12.
Yeah.
and just to understand how alcohol is made and that educational process. And it was actually a really fun little experience we had.
I bet it was kind of
because you
cool.
spend, to do it properly. And I used to be a brewer when I was in college. I thought I was some kind of badass, It takes like 6 hours in the kitchen, and then you wait like 3 weeks to 3 months, and then you bottle it, and then that sits for 3 weeks. He got a little taste. He got a little sip.
Yeah. I got a nephew that does that.
Yeah.
Has his own home brew.
But that education kind of puts a different spin on it.
Chemistry.
Then versus hey, you want to drink an ice house behind the school?
Right.
Like that's a whole different, whereas my son now has the knowledge of, well, I've brewed my own, and I understand where it comes from. It's not like you're not dazzling me with
That's
your
what I'm saying, that with the marijuana,
with your shitty natty ice that you stole from the convenience store.
Ooh, God, it was screwdrivers when I was a kid. Whoa, it was awful. The prepackaged screwdriver stuff. Oh man. But anyway.
All right. So last thing, you speaking to your children about your usage or non-usage of marijuana, hemp and CBD.
And how you feel about things.
Yeah. And that is just that. It is completely, in my opinion, it is completely up to you how you address that with your family. I will tell you this. It has always been my experience that speaking to your children about things versus them finding out on their own, especially if it involves you directly,
oh my God,
is a way better thing. Because you want to get in front of it and you want to have that discussion. And if you don't, you try to keep it in the closet, it's going to come out of the closet.
It will bite you in the
And when it
ass.
comes out of the closet, it's going to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
So you want to minimize the bad things.
And obviously, you want to talk about that stuff when they're older and can comprehend it too.
And it discredits you as a character and a figure in their lives. And it makes,
because when she asked me about it, I wasn't going to lie. I mean, I don't lie. So I was like, yeah, it's used medicinally.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then, getting more with the CBD products and her working there, she understood. But I mean, that takes time. You can't introduce that like a child, like little, teenage years. That's when, well, I guess more and more, even younger nowadays. But it's always just better to be open and honest if you can.
Yeah.
I mean, we are. Probably sometimes too much. Sorry.
I don't know that there's too much. I mean, that's if you're listening to this podcast, you made it through this podcast, you've made the right decision,
right?
And I'm glad that you're listening, and hopefully we're saying things that resonate in your mind that you can have similar experience too.
Yeah, and if we can help in any way. Obviously, Matt and I are a little bit older and a little bit wiser. And my teenager, she's 23 now.
Yeah.
So, wait. She might be older. I don't remember how old she is. She's older. But, she's not a baby anymore. So.
No. And, regardless of how you do it, you should do it.
Oh, my God.
Have that conversation.
I had to do the math in my head. She's actually 25, y'all.
Yeah. Well, in quote unquote stepchildren, I've got you beat. So don't you worry about that.
That's true. Thank you guys for listening. Always reach out to us with any questions. And like I said, if we can help in any way, that is what we're here for. Yeah. So we thank you. Have, again, hopefully you all don't catch the crud or get the crud, and just take more CBD if you need it. Have a good one. Thanks, guys.
Keep it hempy.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Hempin' Happiness with the Hemp Queen
and Emperor.
Keep your mind ever open and expanding. Like, subscribe, review, follow us, all the good stuff. And
keep it hempy out there.